Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Lookout. Today's the 15th of August, first day of school here in Chico. And we're going to talk today about the Six Rivers Fire. My name is Zeke Lunder. I run this website called The Lookout here in Chico. This is not official fire information. We interpret publicly available intelligence and give you our summary. I've been working in wildfire since 1995, so a lot of my experiences in mapping and working in the intel shops on large fires. So I don't go out on the fires anymore, but I still know how to do this stuff, and makes me feel useful. And I'm kind of wired to wake up early in fire season anyway and check the infrared, so might as well share it with y'all. So going to look at what's going on with the fire, kind of the evolution of the fire, the firefighting, talk about the tactics being used. I'll say up front that I'm not there. I'm not assigned. I'm not tied in with the operations planners or anything, so I don't, I'm kind of just seeing a limited view of the fire from the snapshots we get each night with the infrared. So try not to get too deep into predicting what's going on or thinking I know what's going on, but I'll give you my assessment based on this intelligence we're looking at. Basically, even though it's hotter and drier, there's still a lot of influence on this fire by the smoke inversions. And this just happens a lot on big fires in this country where the smoke really lays in thick. And in summertimes, we have what we call high pressure that sits in. So when we have a heat wave, it just means that there's this big kind of stable air mass sitting over the continent, and that kind of creates this layered atmosphere. And that's one. So when you hear that we're having a heat wave or heat wave coming, usually that means that we're going to have pretty stable weather. And stable weather is good for fire because those layers kind of pack in all the smoke, and the fire can't really breathe. So when we see like big mushroom clouds on fires, you don't have the big kind of column-driven fire behavior when you've got a stable atmosphere, because it's hard for the air to really circulate. Those columns need an incredible amount of lift. All that heat going up creates indrafts at the bottom of the column. And so it's kind of like, you know, your wood stove, when you open the door and the air can rush in and the fire can breathe and shoot up your chimney, then your fire starts roaring. And if your chimney's plugged, or if you keep the door closed, your wood stove can't really breathe. You close the damper and the fire dies down. So basically, these inversions and the stable atmosphere is kind of like a big damper on the landscape scale on the fire. And so that's why we see things kind of pick up in the afternoon when the smoke lifts out. Right now, the weather forecasts on the fire are saying that the smoke areas in heavy smoke are 75 to 85 degrees, and areas out of the smoke are in the 90s. And so we can see up to 20 degree temperature differential under heavy smoke versus on the ridge tops where we don't have smoke laying. So as we've been saying for a few days now, the thing to watch on these fires is when we've got a frontal passage, thunderstorms, or just a front moving through the area, kind of like landscape scale weather. That stirs up the atmosphere, that brings instability, and that's what can drive big fire growth. As long as we have stable atmosphere, even if it's hot and dry, under the smoke and with the inversions, we'll only really see the fire pick up in the afternoons when the smoke lifts out and the fire can breathe a little bit. So the forecasts are still for fairly stable atmosphere for a couple days. There's a chance of thunderstorms Tuesday and into Wednesday. That chance has kind of been diminishing over the past few days in the forecasts. But when we do have any sort of frontal passage, there's a lot of fire on the ground that's kind of just been smoldering and cooking and preheating. And so if we do have periods of instability and the smoke peels out earlier in the day, there's likelihood for the fires to make good runs. So we're going to jump into the maps now. I'm going to start off here in Willow Creek proper, and we're going to look up Bremer Creek. Got a couple different new things on the maps today. Brown is hand line, which is just means what it says. It's cut by people with hand tools. Black is dozer line, and blue is places that roads have been prepped and used as fire lines. And another thing we're doing differently today is I'm showing 2 days of fire growth with these white lines. So the white lines are 12 hours or 24 hours before this fire was mapped, which was last night, and then 48 hours before, just to kind of show how the fire's been moving. So one thing that happened yesterday is in the afternoon, there was a big run here in the interior in Bremer Creek. You know, the canyon is running, the winds are coming up the canyon in the afternoon. And so this is a place where we had kind of alignment where the fire became established here in the bottom of this drainage here. And then it could run with the slope and with the up canyon wind. So we call that alignment, and the landscape kind of creates opportunities for that. And so oftentimes in these river canyons, you'll see historic fire scars on these slopes that have alignment where the up canyon wind could hit the sun heated slope as the inversion lifted. So there was some long range spotting on that, but it stayed within kind of the larger containment box. There's a lot of firing going on this fire still. Pretty interesting to look at the evolution of that. So as we go around here, we'll talk about how the firing's progressing. Coming here into Coon Creek, the Waterman fire, they've finished firing down to the bottom of the creek here. There's a little spot across here where the fire is kind of burning interior. And so as of last night, they haven't tied in this last little bit of road here. But the fire's backing down nicely, you know, so you can see 2 days ago, 1 day ago, and then here where the fire is now. Same here, fire was 48 hours ago, was here, back and flanked to here. And so you can see it's a real steadily kind of progression of the flanking fire. On the backside of the Bremer fire, this fire has been backing and rolling out. And here we had some growth yesterday. It's kind of the same thing where the fire rolled out in the canyon, looks like, and got that afternoon up canyon wind and kind of ran back on itself. So looking south over Waterman, this area here continues to back in, and there's a hand line cut down to the bottom here. Fire, you can see, hasn't really been backing very much, but steadily. So kind of look at the big picture here with what kind of how the three fires are coming together. The whole bottom of the Campbell fire is pretty cold. It's been cold for a long time now, and they're calling most of this bottom end of the fire contained now. They got black line on the maps. In the backsides of these fires, we've had firing along the ridge here between Susie Q and Quimby Creek. There were some spots here 3 days ago. Those all have hand line and aren't showing any heat. And then they fired this mid-slope road about 4 days ago, and that's continuing to back down. And then they have fired this prepped road all the way back to the Waterman fire. And yesterday fired this interior ridge here, and they fired this interior ridge 2 days ago. So as we talked about, kind of the idea there of lighting these interior lines is that we don't really want a fire that comes up out of here to be able, if we say the inversion lifts and we've got a sustained kind of long afternoon of active burning, we want to kind of create these breaks in here so it's less likely that this fire is going to make a big run out of here, spot over into here, run, spot up out into here, and run and jump this containment line. So firing these ridges kind of compartmentalizes the landscape. And kind of the objective here is, you know, we were working with this forecast where we know we've been under this stable inversion for, you know, almost 2 weeks. And when we have a forecast, say 3 days out, that we're going to have instability and potential for bigger runs, you know, it's kind of a race to beat the clock here. It's like, can we get enough depth firing off of here to mitigate the hazard of a big run out of here, spotting into here? And if it spots into here. Can we have built enough here depth that a run that comes up out of here isn't going to get enough momentum to spot out of here? So, they're working slowly on filling this in. I don't know how much firing is going on to encourage the fire to back through here, or if they just lit the ridge here with drones and this is all natural backing. Anyway, interesting evolution on the firing here. In a couple of days, we'll probably do a progression map just to show how this has progressed. But another thing that happens when you do put the fire on the ridge and let it back down is you get better fire effects. If we just let this burn from the bottom up, it's likely we're going to kill all the trees in this watershed, and the same in here. If we just waited for this fire to back down and run up out of here, we're going to get a bunch of head fire. Backing fire is generally lower severity. And so I think, we'll hear people saying that, the Forest Service is just treating this as a big prescribed burn. And I think the question is, well, what is the other option here? And if you are going to have to do a big box, to me, it makes sense that you should try to get fire on the ground under your terms, which in this case is like we're under smoke and we've got a ton of resources here to help. So it's a fine line. Right now there's guidance from the chief of the Forest Service saying all fires are going to be managed for suppression or put out with as quick as possible. And at some point the fire that doesn't work anymore because the fire isn't going to let you use those tactics. We're not going to send crews in here and go direct on fire in a steep ground surrounded by other fire. So a lot of good fire gets on the ground during suppression, and that's a kind of a fine line that land managers have to walk of how much do you encourage it, how much do you intervene, how much do you leave it alone. And there's all kinds of room to kind of second guess what's going on and everything else. But I think as for now, we're getting some good fire out of this. There's going to be patches in here of higher severity. There's going to be a lot of patches of lower severity. There's still potential with this much fire on the ground with this hot weather that we're going to have the inversion lift and fire will get out of this box. And, fires are already kind of out of the box here on the backside of Waterman because there's not great opportunities to go direct on this steep ground here. No roads that are helpful. There's a road down into here, but it's not out of the question that all this work that gets done to hold this whole portion here might get lost if, when the inversion lifts, this fire makes a big run up this drainage. But in the meantime, we have to kind of behave as if that's not going to happen. Anyway, the good news here really is just that this mid-slope road is held. That is no small feat for them to have held this mid-slope road on this steep ground in August. These spots haven't moved for days. So all in all, things are looking really good. There's really good depth here. And this whole area in yellow is cooling down. So that wraps up the north branch. We're going to come around now and look at the south branch. Just a little map tip here. This up in the top corner here, there's a north arrow. And so as I'm scrolling around, it might be hard to see if you're looking at this on a cell phone, but there's always going to be a north arrow up here. So right now we're kind of coming around to look from the east up at the Ammon fire, which also was the Oak fire a few days ago. So same on these maps. Yellow areas are cooling down, red areas are hot, white lines are 2 days of fire spread. Over the past couple of days, we've seen kind of that the Ammon fire continues to kind of spread gently in most directions. It's merged with the Charlie fire. Charlie fire has kind of been just kind of making slow growth. It's kind of held up now on the road and on this edge. Where you see the white line on the edge, it means it hasn't grown. It did grow in with Ammon. I think one thing on Charlie is just that when it's done, we're going to see that we probably had some really beneficial fire effects. The fact that this fire's burned for almost 2 weeks and has only burned this much area tells you something about how the fire behaved. I don't really know what's going on with control on these edges, or if they're just letting it back to the roads. One thing that I saw in the intel report for this fire was that projected final size of the fire is 36,000 acres. Right now it's 18,000. So to me, I'd say, well, does that mean they're going to let it burn out to this road? Where are we going to pick up that extra 18,000? It looks clear that we're going to be firing Friday Ridge all the way out to this dozer line, and that this whole backside of Madden Creek is going to get fire on it. We'll get over there in a minute. So the big challenge on Ammon has been that we were getting these afternoon northwest flow on here. Part of that is influenced by the South Fork Trinity, and these are just up canyon winds, but also I think the kind of bigger picture is that there's a little bit of a northwest flow. So what that's done is north is coming from here, so the winds are coming this way. And so the fire here jumped this dozer line a couple days ago. There's another dozer line here, and looks like they've fired the road here to kind of tie this slop over into the road. But it's they're saying that they expect kind of to continually be challenged on this south flank of the fire by the northwest winds. Fires, you can see here that the fire's moved a lot here. This is one of the areas that really woke up yesterday. So, we've got maybe half a mile of spread in the past 24 hours in this area. And when that kind of thing's happening, it just means that, if it makes another half mile run, a little prepped road out in the front of that isn't necessarily going to stop it. And they're not showing this road out here as being prepped yet. So the south end of the fire is definitely one of the more vulnerable areas on the fire. And the intel report for the fire for today says that they anticipate that if we do get this fire more deeply established and we have the inversion lift midweek, that there's potential for a lot of growth on this end of the fire. The fire's cooling off as we move up the slope, and it's up against dozer line. There was a little slop over here a couple of days ago that hasn't moved. This blue line then shows road that's prepped, and there's also no movement here along this prepped road. They've been firing here, but didn't fire yesterday, it looks like, on this road. Mainly they're firing to try to keep ahead of the fire that was out here. When we get higher on the slope here, we've got Spike Buck Mountain out here as a landmark, and this is the Mad River Berry Summit Road. And yesterday I was wondering what was going on with firing down this ridge, and there's a dozer line there. And so it looks like the strategy, yesterday we saw the firing up here, and in the last 24 hours they brought fire down this ridge here, looking like they're tied into this road here with firing. So it looks like the strategy there is to come up this road and tie into this dozer line. Can't really tell if the dozer line's not mapped in the right location or if the fire is over the line. Looks likely that the fire is across that dozer line, but like I said, I'm not there and I don't have very good intel, so I usually am not going to say like, oh, across the dozer line. It's just that the mapping is showing it has. I can't tell you if the dozer line mapping or the infrared is accurate. But this is one of those places where that northwest wind, especially having a saddle here, can kind of push through and push pretty hard. And these ridge tops are where we get our highest winds. The weather forecast for today said that they expect the inversion to be sitting around 3,000 feet with all the smoke under it. We're up here almost to 5,000 at the top here. So also being on the west side of the fire, the prevailing winds are keeping smoke off of this. So we're getting a lot less of the kind of inversion benefit on this portion of the fire. So it's unclear what's happening here exactly. We've got active fire spread here. Fire hasn't spread along this road, but it seems likely that it's going to continue to chunk up in here, and that there's still potential really for this whole basin to go. The whole top of the ridge here has been heavily soaked in retardant, and down this ridge too. Road's prep, dozer line. The one thing about this road is just that it's steep ground and it's on the backside of the ridge, so it's a little easier for them to fire this ridge from the road, but it's also being steep ground with rollout and snags and everything else. It can be hard to hold mid-slope roads, especially if you got getting pushed by adverse winds. This whole part of the fire hasn't really moved much. in the past week. As far as pushing down, there were some spots over the backside of Friday Ridge about a week ago. Those got picked up with hand line and haven't moved. The fire was kind of spreading, flanking in Madden Creek here, and it looks like that's kind of forced this firing operation down Friday Ridge with a dozer line down here. So I expect over the next couple of days we're going to see firing tying in this portion. The fire never crossed Madden Creek on its own over the past 10 days or so. So, but you can see this new firing. Kind of not clear of, this interior firing is the natural spread of the fire. It looks like it probably is. Elsewhere on this end of the fire, there's really not much going on down kind of on the bottom here. And as we mentioned each day, 2021 knob fire is kind of a buffer between Willow Creek and whatever this fire happens to do, unless it kind of comes over the top here. Just looking at kind of the bigger picture, we've got the South Fork Trinity flowing north here, which is kind of extraordinary. Like, we don't see a lot of that in Northern California, of rivers running to the northwest. So definitely can kind of funnel those northwest winds, and also you can kind of have the prevailing wind amplified by the afternoon up canyon effect. So that's the big picture on the Ammon fire. I guess I'll look and see if we've got any comments going here. If I can get over there. Someone's asking if Trinity Village is under threat. Someone says it'd be cool if I answer live chat questions. All right, I'm answering your question. Trinity Village still under threat. A lot of good work going on here, and this part of the fire hasn't moved for days. There's still a chance that the fire is going to get out of their box here. The next week's kind of critical if we get through these changes, the thunderstorms and frontal passages without the fire getting out of this box. I think we're looking really good, but there's this potential until this is all burned out in here. There's potential for runs that could spot out of here, and that this fire could continue to kind of burn out in this area. But if that happens, it's going to be uphill and not in a spot where it's real set up to like come blasting down the mountain into town. As we've seen here, these fires took a long time to burn down the mountain and were controllable. So so far so good. Time will tell on what the weather does, but the more that this gets filled in and cools off, the better for the overall pictures. Okay. I think we're going to call it. First day of school. Gotta get the kids out the door. Good luck, everyone. And if you like what we're doing, consider dropping us a subscription on the lookout.org, the-lookout.org. Keeps us going, keeps me motivated to get up early and do this stuff. Thanks a lot.